Assalamualaikum and good afternoon. My name is Aida, and today we are going to look into one topic in Java programming, which is exception. I'm bringing forward this topic from week 13 and week 14 forward because we have a full online classroom this week, whereby you have to go voting. Please make sure you exercise your rights as Malaysian. Okay, the main thing that we're going to do is your workbook. Okay. We will be looking into two exercises on exception, which is on page 54 and 55. Now, first thing first, what is an exception? An exception is when you have a line of codes. Sometimes it varies. Maybe you have 10 lines, maybe you have 100 lines to 1,000 lines. But when something happens, an error, if let's say we have a syntax error that is easy to catch, whereby we can catch the error during compiling. But when we have runtime error, for example, division by zero, in mathematical operations, we cannot divide a number by zero. Then it becomes a runtime error. Or maybe in other example, such that you have an array, but when you are dealing with your array, you have a loop, isn't it? The loop index array usually starts with 0. Array is a 0-based index, and your loop has an extra count. Maybe you have an array of 5 elements, but your loop starts with 0 to 5, which means you have 6 steps. Okay? So those kind of errors has to be handled gracefully by the program. We do not want to have a program whereby when the user tests and suddenly the program hangs, or they don't know what to do, what happened, the program crash, something like that. So the objective is that to terminate all errors gracefully within the programming code. Now, Java provides a class specifically to do just that, which is the exception class. And basically this class is designed to handle two kinds of errors. One is error produced by the program, by the compiler itself, and we have another one, runtime exceptions classes, whereby runtime exception is part of the classes, as I will show you shortly. So Java will handle two types. One is the exception, the other one is error, and we will go into that exercise. So stay tuned. Thank you. This is a class called Exception Demo. The purpose of this class is to demonstrate the working of exception handling in Java. Now, sometimes the best outcome can be when nothing unusual happens. For example, in this case, the purpose of this program is simply to ask user to enter an integer. If the user enter an integer value, it is fine, nothing unusual, and we get the output as what we wanted. However, if there is an exception whereby the user entered something else other than an integer value, a letter, a character, a boolean value, for example, then the program has to be able to deal with the input mismatch in the form of exception handling, so that the program is able to terminate gracefully. Now, in this program, we have an object called scanner, comes from the class scanner. We have what we call a try block, as well as a catch block. Now, a block is a collection of statements. We can see within this try block, we have 3 statements from line 11 to 13. In the catch block, we only have 1 statement in the line 19. So the purpose of try block is to try or execute every single line until an exception occurs. If an exception or an error occurs at any line from within the try block, an exception will be thrown. For example, the class scanner that we use will invoke an IO exception whenever we or the user does not adhere or conform to the format that is required by the scanner, which in this case, we are using the nextInt method from the scanner class to read an integer from the user. So if an exception is thrown at this line, the remaining line, which is on line 13 within the try block, will not be executed. But what happened? It will be thrown to a catch mechanism provided by Java. So in the catch block, basically we have one object called EX, but this is just an object name. You can replace with any other variable that you like, but it comes from a class called input mismatch exception. So again, when an exception is thrown from this line, it will be catched by this statement, and the system will output this line, try again, incorrect input, and integer is required before it terminates. Therefore, user will be informed of what is happening when he or she enters the wrong values, rather than it terminates abruptly. So let's try to run this program. We have the console here. As you can see, the console prompts a statement, prompts a message to a user, enter an integer, and let's assume I'm going to enter a value 23. So the program runs good. Because 23 is an integer, therefore the third line here in line 13 will be executed. The number entered is 23 because 23 has been stored in the variable number. Now let's say we run another time, but this time instead we put a letter A. When we try to feed the input A to the scanner class, it will invoke an exception in line 12, and the exception will be thrown to the catch block, and the line 19 will be executed instead. So again, when I enter a letter A, the statement in line 13 will not be executed because A is a letter, is a character, it is not an integer. Therefore, line 19 will be executed. This is called or handled under a class, a subclass of exception class, which is called input mismatch exception. This is a class called test exception. In this class, we are going to see what kind of exception is thrown when we have an extra count in an array. So basically, in this class, there is one main method, and within the main method, we have two variables. One is total, another one is list, which is a type of array. And this list has 5 elements with value 12, 16, 20, 54, and 13. Now, we only want to see, the purpose of this program is to find the total sum of the values within the array. If you notice, we have 5 elements, but we purposely try to have more than one element in the counting step within the for loop. For integer I equals to 0, but I less than 6, which means you will get 6 steps. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, the statement that we wish to test will be put in the try block. And again, we have a catch block to catch the exception when it happens. Only that in this example, we have 3 catch blocks. The first one is arithmetic exception, which will output a statement arithmetic exception. the second one is runtime exception, and the final one is the exception. And during the last line, we have on the line 29, we will output to the console the total of the sum within the array. Now let's try this. If we run the program, immediately we will get this result. So what is the result? The result is runtime exception and the value 115. Runtime exception, because we use try and catch block, because we handle the exception properly using the exception class in Java, the program fortunately does not terminate abruptly. That means when the error or the exception happens, the system simply output what is the current status. So in this case, again, when the compiler try to sum or try to find total the value in list I to the value total, because there is an extra step, there will be an exception thrown, and that exception which is thrown is catched by this runtime exception. Therefore, the display is runtime exception. And the program does not stop there. Even though there is an error, it proceeds. In this case, the last statement in line 29, system.out.println total is executed. So if you can check, 12 plus 16 plus 20 plus 54 plus 13 is indeed 115. So let's try to amend this. If we change the condition I is less than 5, we should be getting 5 elements because we start with 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because 4 is less than 5 and 5 less than 5 is false. So let's save that. Oops. Let's compile again and run. And the result is just exactly as we wanted, 115. And another point that you have to be aware of is that in Java, within the object class, there is a subclass called throwable. In throwable, there are two types of subclasses. One is called exception, another one is error. Within the exception class, you can Google the exception hierarchy class. Within the exception class, there are many other exceptions, such as class not found exception, runtime exception, arithmetic exception. Now, the only rule of writing the catch block is that the subclass has to be ordered first. For example, arithmetic exception is a subclass of runtime exception, and runtime exception is a subclass of exception. Then again, in your program, it is totally up to you if you were to use only one type of exception, if you are sure what kind of error that might be thrown from during the program execution, or you can choose quite a number of it, just like what we have in this program here. Okay.